Good morning, good evening, or depending on your time zone, good afternoon, and welcome to our 2-hour PSAT cram session. Let me know in the chat, folks. How's it going? How's the old life treating you here? Let me just make sure that the sound works, the chat works, though it looks like it works. This is a very big and boisterous group. Thank you all so much for being here. Glad that you're in pretty good spirits. That's phenomenal. This is a very, very, very fast-paced session, so let's go ahead and do a very brief amount of introduction, and then we're going to get right to cracking. So first of all, my name is Boris. I'm a professional SAT, PSAT, and ACT instructor for Kaplan. I also teach some other tests, but those are the main ones I focus on these days. I'm joined behind the scenes by Benji, who is also, like me, a teacher. In fact, many classes, I was the off-camera teacher and he was the on-camera teacher. So we both have the same job at Kaplan. And today you can kind of think of Benji as your private tutor. If you have any questions, please ask in the Q&A. We do ask that you ask questions in the Q&A so that we get all the questions in one place and we don't miss them. There's a lot of you here, so questions in the chat are probably not going to get answered because they'll scroll away before Benji can respond to them. Also, got to give a shout out to our tech wizard Rich, who is here behind the scenes making sure that this live stream event with so many students is functional. Okay, so let's begin. We're going to start with a quick introduction to just the PSAT, like some format issues, and then we'll review math and reading and writing. It is a cram session. It's going to go by very quickly, and I cannot promise this will be a comprehensive prep for the PSAT. We have a PSAT class that's 6 hours long, and our SAT class, for reference, is 18 hours long. So there's much more work that we can do to help you succeed than just the 2 hours today. But let's do just a quick overview of the PSAT before we can get to what we can. So the test is about 2 hours and 14 minutes long, plus a 10-minute break. This is exactly the same length as the SAT. You will have two modules of reading and writing, then a break, and then two modules of math. Now, the test is adaptive. So what that means is that your second module will either be harder or easier depending on how many questions you get right in the first module. You do not want to miss the hard module. It's very, very important that your second module be the hard one because if you get the easy one, then your score is capped in like the low to mid 500s for that section. You just can't break a 600 if you're getting the easier module. By contrast, you can get the harder module and get a lot of questions wrong on it and still get like a 600 or higher. So it is very, very important to prep to the point where you can routinely get enough of these first module questions correct that the second module that you're seeing is the hard one. Do not try to sandbag it. There is no redeeming advantage for being in the easier module. You do not want to be there. All right, so that's it for the section structure. Just you can go over that at more depth later on if you wish to. But of course, I want to try to focus as much time as I can today on the actual math content. So a quick note about the test. You will get a graphing calculator built into the test. Now, let me know in the chat for those of you who know, for those of you who have been over the social media space for the test, what is the name of this calculator? It is Desmos. That's right. And I'm going to share a link with you now in the chat. It's going to scroll away pretty quickly. You can search for like SAT or PSAT Desmos if you want to find it again. But that link right there is something you should have open every time you prep for the SAT and for the PSAT. Never ever do math prep without that open. Of course, if you're taking a practice test in Blue Book, you don't need to have that link open because you can just use the built-in calculator. But when you practice, use this calculator. Also, please do not spam 67. It is hilarious. It is hilarious, but please do not do that. We are going to remove people who are spamming the chat because we want to make sure that those of you who want to learn for the PSAT today have the opportunity to do so. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the math section of the test. And I personally will emphasize Desmos a lot. And I want to be clear about this. This is not to say that every single question should be solved with Desmos. In fact, the majority of PSAT and SAT questions should be answered using reasoning or sometimes math on your scratch paper. The SAT and PSAT appear to be aware of the fact that Desmos is a very powerful calculator, so a lot of the questions are reasoning questions and cannot just be answered by plugging into Desmos. But math reasoning is something you've already studied a lot in school. And Desmos, by contrast, is something a lot of people don't know about. So I am going to emphasize how Desmos can be used to answer questions. All right, so let's take a look at this one to introduce. Okay, I beg your pardon. I'm going to turn off the reactions. And Rich, I think it would be very helpful if we could get a second off-camera teacher here. Because we have a lot of questions coming into the Q&A. So if you have asked a question and have not gotten an answer yet, it is very, very busy. And I promise that Benji, with all 8 of his arms, is doing the best job that he can to answer some of these questions. In fact, let me actually pause here. Some people are asking about like what grade level. This is for anyone taking the PSAT. Some people are asking, is there a PDF for students? There are not. Can you bring your own calculator? Yes, you can, though I personally don't recommend using one. I think Desmos is better for literally everything, but you can bring your own calculator. Someone has to know, is the PSAT calculator set on degrees or radians? It is set to radians by default, so you do need to turn it to degrees. Is the graph and calculator available on every question? Yes. Is there anything new today compared to the session from yesterday? Well, I don't know. I didn't see yesterday's session, but I do know at Kaplan I'm the most Desmos friendly teacher. So chances are the Desmos element of today will be a little bit different. Can most of the questions be answered by Desmos? No. Most of the questions need to be answered by reasoning. Yes, you can have your own calculator, though I don't recommend it. Will we be doing reading today? Yes, we will be doing reading today. So let's go ahead. Benji, I hope I was helpful there, blowing through a few Q&A questions there for you. Let's go ahead and take a look at this problem. So let me know in the chat, are you pretty comfortable solving this question by algebra? You know, coming in here today, is this a question that you would consider pretty trivial to answer? Okay, great. So what I'm going to do is take advantage of this opportunity to show you how you can use Desmos to solve equations. And this is given to you on the test. You do, in fact, have this. I know sometimes it may seem too good to be true, but you do, in fact, have what I'm about to show you on test day. This Desmos calculator that I have linked is a copy of the Desmos calculator that will be available in the Blue Book application. When you type an equation into Desmos, it won't quite solve it for you. There are 2 rules that you have to follow in order to get Desmos to solve an equation. One, Desmos is a graphing calculator, so when it sees x or y, it graphs. You don't want it to graph here, though. You want it to solve an equation. So what you need to do, first of all, is make sure that you use a letter other than x. So here, for example, I'm going to replace it with an n. Besides this, we're still getting an error here, and that is because you can't use an equal sign when you're asking Desmos to solve an equation. What you need to use is a tilde. Now let me know in the chat, do you know how to type a tilde? Or for that matter, do you know what a tilde is? Look in the chat, a lot of people have no idea what a tilde even is. And I want you to take a moment and appreciate throughout today's session just how crazy it is that the majority of your competition, more than half of the people taking the PSAT with you, competing with you for those semi-national merit finalist scholarships, are not even going to know what this character is called, let alone how to type it or how to use it on test day. This button on most keyboards is above the tab key to the left of 1. It is a horizontal squiggly line, and you have to press Shift to make it. When you type it like this, and you have an equation using letters other than x or y, Desmos will solve the equation for you. It'll tell you what the variable needs to be in order for the equation to be true, in order for the left side to equal the right side. Now, one thing you should always check when solving an algebra or geometry problem. Today we're not doing any geometry, we're just focusing on algebra, but this is true on geometry as well. Make sure that you check when solving for a variable or finding a side measurement that that is what the test makers wanted. Is 9.5 the final answer on this question? No, we need 2x, not x. So make sure you always check after you solve for a variable or for the measurement of a side. Is that what the task makers wanted? Here they need 2x, not just x. Notice, by the way, you can now use this letter in a new line, and Desmos will remember what it was. Like it learned that it was 9.5 from the regression that you wrote. So when you type it in a new line, Desmos knows it's 9.5, and you can actually type 2n and then get your answer. Just grab choice D for domination and move on with the test. All right, now I'm going to give you a chance to practice this. Make sure that you are always checking to make sure that you're done instead of just popping in the first answer that you get. All right, so here, I beg your pardon, I'm actually thinking of a different question. Let me pause for a second. On This next question, we're going to use Desmos in a slightly different way. By the way, I know a lot of you are very excited about your answers. So I'm going to open up a poll. If you ever have an answer, please put the answer in the poll to avoid the spoilers in the chat. So if you have it already solved, feel free to grab it now. But in this one, let's talk about a different way that we can use Desmos to solve it. So in this case, what we could do is we could actually graph the equations. So there's the first one, and there's the second one. Now, after graphing these in a graphing calculator, if we're looking for the solution to the system, what feature of the graph should we look for? We should use the intersection. Now, a little bit about Desmos mechanics. You can click and drag to move around. You can also use the mouse wheel to zoom in and out. My personal favorite way, though, if you have something that's not showing up on the main, like, home zoom of the Desmos calculator, is click this minus button. Go whoop, 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 and then you get out very quickly. At this point, if you click on one of the graphs or click in the field where it was typed, Desmos will generate dots. So if I click on this red line, for example, Desmos generates a dot everywhere it crosses an axis and everywhere it crosses another thing that was graphed. If you hover over this dot, then you get the intersection point. So it's just 28.4. And if you're wondering, is that really the final answer? Yeah, that's the final answer on that one. That's the solution to the system. So systems of equations questions are also very effectively solved in Desmos. You just graph it, and then you click on one of the equations to generate the dots and hover over the dot where it crosses the other graph. Now, there are, of course, other ways to solve a system, and you might say, Boris, that's ridiculous. You know, in the time that you typed it and looked at the dot, I could have just solved this by math, and that's correct. This one is very quickly solvable by algebra as well. Don't do Desmos on everything, but you should learn how to use Desmos so that when it is the fastest approach for you, you're able to use it effectively. All right, folks, let's go ahead and take a look at functions. We're really going to be zipping through the math content and looking at a wide amount of algebra today. Again, this is not meant to be a comprehensive. It really is truly a cram session. So a quick reminder of how function notation works. If you have a function, what you're basically told is if the input is x, equal sign, do this with x to get the output. So in this case, the instructions to turn an input into an output are you take the input and you add 2. So let me know in the chat, folks, what would be like f of 7 using this function example? It is 9, because it would be instead of x plus 2, 7 plus 2, which is 9. And so we say that f of 7 is 9. This also means that when you graph the function, the point 7, 9 will be on the graph. Now, this is something that you would spend weeks, if not months, studying in an advanced algebra class. If you're taking the PSAT at an early grade, you literally might never have seen this before. So don't feel bad if this is a bit foreign. This is just something that, you know, when you take the PSAT in a later year, hopefully you will have studied it more. Though, of course, you can also work on it in the Khan Academy free SAT course online if you want to try to learn this function stuff on your own. Sometimes the PSAT will give you a table. So instead of giving you a function definition, it will give you a table. And the table is essentially a sampling of values. So this table is saying, hey, when x is -2, f of x is 0. When x is 0, f of x is 2. When x is 1, f of x is 3, and so on. So you're not seeing the entire definition of the function, but you are given a sample of inputs and their corresponding outputs. Some people are asking if we're doing reading and writing today. Yes, but we are spending more of our time today on math than we are in reading and writing. All right, I'm going to give you this question to try entirely on your own. If you'd be so kind, folks, please give this one a shot and vote in the poll when you're done. Benji, don't worry about timers. Just keep on hacking away at the Q&A. All right, folks, that was about a minute. Let's go ahead and review. The test makers are asking for what input is the output 24. So let me ask you this. Is the PSAT asking for x or is it asking for f of x? It's asking for x, which means that 24 is what? What do the test makers mean when they say the output of the function is 24? They mean that the f of x is 24. So just so we're very clear, doing 5 times 24 minus 6 is wrong on this one. What's correct is to say that 24 equals 5x minus 6. Pause here, digest. Make sure that that makes sense. This is what you should be doing to solve this problem. And that's what I mean when I say that the PSAT is primarily not a test of, just shoving stuff into Desmos. There is a cognitive element here. Translating the words correctly is crucial to getting the question right. Now you can maybe do this algebra in your head. 24 plus 6 is 30, and 30 over 5 is 6, getting our most popular answer here, choice C for champions, and you can grab that one in Skadoodle. If you want to practice your Desmos typing skills, though, that would be like this. 24 equals 5x, but don't use x, minus 6, and then you get your answer that way as well. With function questions, read very carefully because a little tiny twist of wording can change whether x is the number you've been given or f of x. Now, we talked briefly about graphs of functions. How I said that if you know a input-output pair, that means that that is a point on the function. So here is an example of this. If we have this function, I don't know what the equation is. I just know this is y equals f of x. Let me know in the chat, folks, what is f of 2? It is 1. Because basically, when I say what is f of 2, I'm asking when x is 2, what is the y coordinate? And when x is 2 right here, the y coordinate is 1. So even without knowing the definition of the function, I know for an absolute fact that whatever the function is, f of 2 is 1. Now, if for some reason you needed to find this function on the test, there is a way to do this. Let me know in the chat if you've ever worked with the table feature in Desmos. Okay, I'm seeing about half and half yeses and nos, maybe a few more nos. All right, so if you've worked with Desmos and tables before, this will be familiar to you. However, if you have not, I'm about to open up a whole new world of magic here because this can make a really big difference on a few, not many, but on a few PSAT and SAT questions. This can make a huge difference. You click this plus button here, and then click on table. 2 weeks ago, I was teaching a class, and one of my students was like, Boris, you can actually type the word table. And that's totally true. It was crazy. You just type the word table, and when you hit the E, it makes a table. So make a table however you want, whether it's through the plus button or by typing the word table. And then put in some clear points. All right, I gave you the point 2, 1. You can hit the tab key, by the way, to go from one cell to another quickly. Give me another point that's really clearly on this function. Like, give me a point that you're like, yeah, that point is definitely on there. Yeah, 4, 0 seems like a pretty clear one. All right, so there it is. 4, 0. That one seems very clear. 4, 0. When you put at least 2 points into a table, this button appears. It looks like 3 dots around a line. When you hover over it, it says graph or add regression. You click on it, and Desmos gives you the equation of the line. Just bam, for free. Y equals negative half x plus 2. So if you ever have 2 points on a straight line, and you need to know the y-intercept, or you want to know the slope, or heck, maybe you need the entire equation, just shove those points into a table, click that button. Again, I'll show you one more time. You put the points into the table, you click this button right here, and there you go. You have the free equation without any effort. You don't need to find the slope or put the slope in a point to slope intercept form or do point slope form and solve for y. You don't need to do any of that. You just need to shove it in there and click the button. That can be sometimes the whole question, but even if it's not the entire question, that can be a really nice time-saving step as part of another question. In fact, on this one, if you'd like, you can practice using this table to solve it. And if you do, you can get the answer relatively quickly. Again, I'm going to give you about a minute to work on it. No need for a timer, Ben. You just keep hacking at the Q&A. I'll see you folks in about 60 seconds to review it. Good luck. Some people are asking, what are some good resources to prep for the PSAT? My advice would be just to prep for the SAT, because that pretty much counts. And I'll share a link with you. This is the Khan Academy official SAT course. It's online, it's free. You can log in, you can save your progress, and you can chip away a little bit at a time. And it's all official questions. So if you are doing free prep, I would recommend starting there. Of course, Kaplan also has a PSAT class and an SAT class if you want something a little bit more serious and with the help of a live instructor. All right, so on this one, the test makers are asking how many gallons of water are drained per hour. Now you see this phrase, something per hour. Let me know in the chat, folks. That is code for what? What is that code? That's right, Zybri 5 gang. That is code for slope. So basically, if I could find the slope of this line, I would have the answer to this question. So let me know in the chat, what is a clear point on this line? When I say clear point, I mean like, that point right there is not that clear. I don't really know what that is. I'd have to do some approximation. But yeah, the y-intercept seems extremely clear. That really seems like 0, 25,000. I'm gonna shove it in the table. What's another point that seems really, really clear? I'm seeing some great options in the chat. I saw someone do 6, 14,000. Nice catch. That's a pretty good one. I like this one because it's not going to give us the exact answer, but you don't have to be exact. On the SAT and PSAT, answer choices are information. These are so spaced far apart that you know that a little bit of approximation is going to be okay. So I type these points in the table, and then what do I do? What do I do after I shove these points into Desmos? I kick the regression button. Bloop. And there we go. We have 1833. All right, which answer choice seems pretty close to that? Pretty close to 1833. That seems to be choice C. There's no other choice that's anywhere close. Bam. Slam it, move on with the test. A lot of you folks found this one. Very, very nicely done. But um, on test day, that's all you have to do. You don't actually have to understand anything other than that drained per hour means slope. And so if you can plug 2 points to find 2 points to put into the Desmos table, you've got the slope for free. And someone was asking, do we have the calculator today? Yes, I know it seems hard to believe. Seems hard to believe. But yes, you do have the Desmos calculator on test day. And the link I just shared in the chat is a copy of the calculator that will be in the blue book when you take the actual PSAT. And by the way, if you want to know something really crazy, this regression button didn't used to be on there. So people who took the digital SAT when it first came out in March of 2024, they didn't have this button. This button didn't come out till like this year, like January of this year or maybe last December, this button came out. I just logged into Desmos, I saw it, and I was like, what? No, there's no way that's on the. I like immediately went into Blue Book, updated it. Like there's no way that they actually added this button to Blue Book. They did. So previous generations of students, someone taking the PSAT last year would not have had this button, but now you have it. And it's crazy because a lot of people taking the test competing with you aren't going to know about it, so they're just not going to use it, but now you are. And so you have the opportunity to save time compared to a lot of people. All right, do another question. This one, the ability of Desmos to help you is dubious. So attack this one by whatever strategy you think is best. We'll see you in about a minute to review it. There are many, many examples of questions on the PSAT that primarily test your reasoning ability, your ability to like interpret math more than just like doing actual challenging, really hard math. And this is an example of one of them. So whenever you see intersecting x-axis or intersecting y-axis, that is a bit of SAT and PSAT code that you should be able to translate. Folks, when you see intersects x-axis or x-intercept, that means what equals 0? It means that y equals 0. So that means that when y equals 0, x equals a. And you can actually solve this by hand or be really lazy like I am and type it into Desmos and get that a equals 2. Pause here, digest, make sure that makes sense. Ask us in the Q&A if you have questions about why a equals 2 or more broadly why 0 equals negative 5a plus 10. All right, folks, if we could please keep it polite and civil in the chat. We are going to need to remove some people because it's starting to get a little bit out of hand. So please, if you'd be so kind, if you have something obnoxious to say, type it in another window, not the chat for this session. Thank you. We appreciate your help. Now we learn that it intersects the y-axis at 0b. Let me know in the chat, folks, when you see intersects the y-axis, that is code for what being 0? Indeed, everybody, that is code for x being 0. So b is actually a lot easier. B just equals negative 5 times 0 plus 10, which is obviously just 10. Notice the difference here. I'm not using a regression here. I know what I want b to be. I just want b to be negative 5 times 0 plus 10. So a equals 2, b equals 10, but the test makers want a times b, so make sure that you remember to always check, am I done? Have I completed the problem? I need to multiply these two together and get 20 to get the actual final answer to the question. Now, I did my scratch work in Desmos, but do you really have to use Desmos to solve this one? Not really. This is pretty easy to do mentally or on scratch paper. The important thing is that on the PSAT, and this transfers to the SAT as well, the test makers seem to have an obsession with it. X-intercept means y is 0. Y-intercept means x is 0. You have to make that translation in your head every time you see those terms. It is, for whatever random reason, an integral component of a recurring set of practice problems written by College Board. By the way, Ricardo's totally correct. If you type the original function into Desmos, you'll get gray dots where it intersects the axes, and you can multiply those together. That completely works as well. All right, our next question is a nonlinear function question. These are not really that different from regular function questions. What makes them nonlinear is the fact that x is being raised to a power higher than 1. But otherwise, it's the same thing that we've been practicing here. So I'm just going to flip up a poll for you. Give this one a shot. In about a minute, we're going to review it. Good luck. All right, gang, welcome back. Let's go ahead and review this question. So when the test makers say, for which value of x is g of x equals 63? Does that mean that I put 63 in for x? No, 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 no. And on this one, they were clearer. It's g of x equals 63. So basically, where there is a 63, or sorry, where there is a g of x, I replace it with a 63. Anybody use the tilde on this one? Anybody practice your Desmos typing? You don't have to. It's not required. It's maybe not even the best way to solve the problem, but it is good practice for your typing. By the way, there is a keyboard. Someone was asking earlier, how do I type things on an iPad? You can click this button here and it'll show up a keypad. My mission in life is to avoid this at all costs. I'm a big keyboard shortcuts guy. So if you are like me and don't want to open that ever, you press Shift 6 to make an exponent. And then there you go. X equals 3. Check to make sure you're done. Yes, we are done. We're looking for X. We're going to type in choice or click on choice A and move on with the test. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, Boris, that's ridiculous. Boris, that is one of the craziest things I've ever seen a math teacher tell me to do. I mean, come on, bro. Can't you just tell that 63 minus 9 is 54, half of 54 is 27, and I know my cube, so 27 is 3 cubed? Yes, that is, of course, faster than typing it into Desmos, if you can just do it instantly in your head. So I'm not saying Desmos is the best way. It's just a way that you can practice your typing skills on this nonlinear functions question. Right, for those of you who are here looking for a challenge, this is a very challenging question. I'm going to give you closer to 2 minutes for this one. If you'd be so kind, folks, give this one a shot. And I want you to be strategic. If you're stumped on it, then before you just smash your head into a brick for the next 2 minutes, think to yourself, I would flag and skip it on test day. It's very, very important that you flag and skip hard questions in both reading and writing and math so that you don't waste a bunch of time on something that's not really getting you any points. Give yourself as much time as possible to answer the questions you know how to answer before you start hitting your head against a brick wall trying to grind out those last few points. All right, give it a shot. Good luck. My apologies, folks. I accidentally closed the poll a little bit early. Please, if you'd be so kind, vote for your answer if you already submitted one. I apologize for that. I did not mean to close it as early as I did, and I'll give folks a few more seconds to work on it if you are still working on this question. All right, folks, welcome back. Let's go ahead and review this question. By the way, a few people have been asking us to go a little bit slower. This is a cram session, right? Our SAT course is 18 hours long. That's for comprehensive PSAT or SAT prep. Our PSAT course, which is a condensed version of our SAT course, is still kind of crammy, but that's still 6 hours long. So of course, if this is a little bit fast for you today, if you're not like, an advanced math student, this is going to be very, very fast for you. You definitely should take a look at some other resources, either a Kaplan class or work with the Khan Academy class if you prefer to work on your own to really get fully up to speed on this math content. So let's go ahead and review. The test makers are asking for the minimum value of f of x. And what f of x is it's a piecewise function. There's 3 components. So if x is a negative number less than or equal to 1, then you're going to do negative 3x minus 5. If x is a fraction between negative 1 and positive 1, then x will be x squared minus, f of x will be x squared minus 3. And finally, if x is greater than 1, then f of x will be negative 2x cubed. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to label these sections. Section 1, Section 2, and Section 3. Tell me, please, which section of this function is going to give you the minimum value of f of x? This is, again, not a Desmos thing. This is what the PSAT and SAT do on the majority of questions. This is a reasoning thing. It is section 3. Section 3 is the one that's going to give you the minimum value, not section 1 and not section 2. And if you're wondering why that is, it's because in section 1, you have negative values for x. What happens when you multiply a negative number by -3? It's going to be positive. I don't want positive. Positive sucks. I want negative values. I'm looking for a minimum value of f of x. But in section 3, I have a positive number, x is greater than 1. I cube it, and I multiply it by -2. Gang, if I take a positive number, cube it, and multiply it by -2, what's that going to be? It's going to be negative. And as x gets bigger and bigger and bigger, what's going to happen to it? It's going to get even more negative. It's just going to just like plummet way down into the negatives. And that's why it's D. You don't actually have to do a single tick mark of scratch paper, and certainly don't need to type anything into Desmos for this one. This is purely a test of your mathematical reasoning. It's a hard question. I'll show you in the poll. 51% of us got an answer at all. And of the people who got an answer, almost half still got it wrong. So it's a very, very hard question. But the magic of the PSAT and SAT is that hard does not mean time consuming. Hard just means that it is difficult to understand, but if you do the work and understand it on test day, it's a free point, and you might not even realize it's a question that's going to be a challenge for your competition or will be a huge boost to the scoring scale. All right, folks, nice work here. Now we are doing a lot today. We are even going to get into some advanced algebra in this hour, something that we don't do until like the 7th session of the 9-session SAT course. We're going to do a little bit of a review of FOIL and factoring. So let's review how to FOIL. I know a lot of you may have learned this in school as the box method rather than as FOIL. But the idea is that when you're multiplying two binomials together, you basically have to take every single possible combination of terms and multiply them. So F, if you have not learned it this way, stands for the first terms. When I multiply the first terms together, what do I get? I get x squared. Yes. The O in FOIL stands for the outer terms. When I multiply the outer terms together, what do I get? X times 1 is x. All right, then we're going to get to the I in FOIL, the inner terms. Oopsies, I did not want to do that. Then we get to the I in FOIL. These are the inner terms. They're like right next to each other. What do I get when I multiply them together? Yes, it's a -2 times a positive x. So that's going to be a -2x. And finally, we have L. The L stands for the last terms. And what do I get when I multiply these together? I get -2. Usually on the PSAT, there will be one pair of like terms that can be combined. So for example, plus x minus 2x, I can combine those, and that's -x. And thus we have the final answer, x squared minus x minus 2. So that is a very quick review of something, again, you'd probably spend like a week or several weeks practicing in school, how to multiply two binomials. Now, the really tricky thing on the PSAT is how to do this method backwards. So let's say that you're solving an equation like this. It's not actually very clear what x needs to be, and we can't isolate an x using basic algebra because one of the x's is squared and one of them is not, so there's no way to combine them. What you got to do in this case is look for two magic numbers. These magic numbers need to multiply to the number on the outside and add to the number in the middle. Now, what are the magic numbers that when you multiply them, you get +12, but when you add them, you get -8? It is -6 and -2. Now, you're not done. Remember, on the PSAT, whenever you're solving for a variable, always stop and ask yourself, have I actually solved for what the test makers wanted me to solve? What are the actual answers to the equation? It's +6 and +2 because these are the values of x that actually cause the function to equal 0. So on these problems, it's really critical that you take an extra beat and finish solving the problem because -6 and -2 could very well be trap answers on the problem. Now, I'm also going to show you how you can solve this in Desmos. This is a technique a lot of people don't know because it's not exactly like a It's not like a Desmos technique per se. It's more about how to use Desmos effectively rather than like an actual Desmos mechanic. So what a lot of people do to solve this in Desmos is they'll be like x squared minus 8x plus 12 equals 0. They'll type the equation in there, and then you get these like two vertical lines, and they'll like hover over them to get the answer. Except sometimes it doesn't make the gray dots, and then it can be hard to bring them back. It's really inconsistent. Sometimes Desmos makes the gray dots, sometimes it doesn't. My advice to you, don't type equals 0 in. Leave the equals 0 off. Just type everything to the left of the equals 0. And then zoom in. In fact, default zoom works really nicely on this one. When you graph anything in Desmos, it creates gray dots wherever it crosses an axis. So there it is. My answers are 2 and 6. And I don't have these like weird, funky vertical lines. I actually have the full graph, and I just look at where it crosses the x-axis. Now, this is again a little bit of cognitive difficulty. You have to understand that if I were to graph this, then wherever it crosses the x-axis is the value of x that makes this equal 0. Because remember, x-intercept means y is 0. This is my y over here. It's equaling 0, which is why I want to find where this curve crosses the x-axis. Remember, if you don't have gray dots, by the way, you can make them appear either by clicking on the curve or, I personally find it easier, clicking in the line where the function is defined. Like if I click in this field, it'll go from a gray border to a blue border that will also make the gray dots appear everywhere it crosses an x-axis. And you can also click on these gray dots if you want them to stay up after moving your mouse away, if for any reason you want to see what they are both at the same time. All right, so I'm not saying you necessarily need to use Desmos on the next question. In fact, on this one, I will probably not use Desmos myself. Give it a shot. I'll see you in about a minute to review it. The poll is open. All right, gang, very nicely done. Let's go ahead and review it. So the test makers are basically asking you to FOIL or box method this product of two binomials. So we're going to start with the 3x times the x, and that is 3x squared. Now, I'm going to interject a little bit of strategy in here. Can I eliminate any answers based on the fact that it's 3x squared? No, every single answer choice starts with 3x squared. So actually, you didn't technically have to do that. Now, in this case, it's such an easy problem, it doesn't really matter. But I do want to point this out. One of my SAT laws is answer choices are information. You should look at what the answer choices are telling you because sometimes it can save you some trouble. In this case, it's not that big of a deal, but there are harder questions where using the answer choices to your advantage can save you a non-trivial amount of work. I just wanted to point that out. All right, now let's go ahead and do the O in FOIL, the outer. 3x times 2, which is 6x, and then the inner minus 6x. So what x term are we going to end up having at the end of this problem? We're going to have no x. Which answer choices does that eliminate? B and C. Now that might have eliminated all three, then you could be done. But in this case, we're not done. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do the L in FOIL, the last terms. And is that positive or is it negative? A negative 6 times a positive 2 will be a negative 12. So that's why it's choice A, not choice D. D for darn it. A for awesome on this one. We're going to grab it and move on with the test. Now, someone has written in the Q&A, I haven't learned any of this in school. Can you help me? I'm going to be honest. Today in this cram session, we really can't help someone who has not learned this in school. I apologize. You will need to learn this in school or learn it on your own via Khan Academy, which I think does a really nice job teaching all the math. But yeah, today is going to be a little tricky in these parts if you have not ever studied this in school before. All right, let's take a look at another one. This one has a few different options for solving it. So consider your strategies, vote in the poll, or if you don't see a poll, I'm sorry, please do not put your answers in the chat, and I'll see you folks in about a minute to review it. All right, folks, that was about a minute. Let's go ahead and review it. Let me know in the chat, folks, who did this one by factoring? It is a really good approach on this one. There are two numbers that clearly multiply to 8 and add to 6. Let me know in the chat, folks, what two numbers very clearly add up to or multiply to 8 and then add up to 6. Yeah, 2 and 4. I want to point this out, though. Notice how 2 and 4 are both answer choices on this one, C and D. Combined, they got over 10% of the vote. In fact, they got about an eighth of the vote combined. So that's not a trivial trap by any means. But they're both wrong because if you pick C or D, you did not check to make sure that you were finished. What are the actual solutions after you factor? They are -2 and -4. Those are the values of x that actually make the expression equal to 0. So the answer is my totally unbiased favorite choice of all time, choice B for Boris. Today also for our off-camera teacher, choice B for Benji. And we're going to click on it and skedoodle. By the way, if you decided to be lazy on this one, if you're like, let's just put it into Desmos, x squared plus 6x plus 8. Remember, don't type the equals 0 part. Just type the part to the left of the equal sign, then look at where it crosses the x-axis. You can see the solutions are -2 and -4. -4 is not in the answer list. -2 is. Click B and you're done. You wouldn't even maybe realize that C and D are tempting traps for students. This happens a lot on the PSAT or SAT where being lazy and using Desmos can help you avoid traps that are only tempting to someone who is doing the math properly. In school, I know math teachers, or at least the ones I had, I don't know how it is nowadays, but in my day, math teachers really liked to encourage deep understanding of math, doing the actual math, not just shoving stuff in a calculator, having it do it for you. They wanted to encourage you to figure everything out on your own. And that is good if you're trying to learn math. But on the PSAT, take the shortcut. You know, you're just trying to click on the right answers. This is not the day that you want to be showing off your math knowledge. You just want to get the answer as quick as possible. And if that means cheating with Desmos, then cheat with Desmos. Nobody is judging you for how you solve these problems. All right, now we're not done with quadratics. If we're going to start quadratics, we got to talk about the quadratic formula because there will be so-called mean quadratics on the PSAT and SAT, ones that you cannot solve by factoring. In order to do this reverse FOIL trick that we've been doing, it has to be a very precise set of specifications. You know, you need to have the coefficient of x squared be 1, and then the middle number and the outer number have to work magically together. So there's a pair of numbers that multiply to 1 and add to the other. You know, if you change this 8 to like a 7 or a 10, like this doesn't work anymore. And so then you got to use the quadratic formula. Now let me know in the chat, folks, do you currently have the quadratic formula memorized? Excellent. Now, I know there's like some seventh graders here. You might be like, the quadratic who now? And yeah, that's one of those things. This is on the PSAT. You haven't studied it in school yet. Be kind to yourself. Obviously, if you've not had this in a math class yet, it's not going to make any sense, nor is a cram session that's like, spending 10 minutes on this topic going to teach it to you. Obviously, you're going to need to put in the months in school like everyone else did to really learn it, unless you're a math genius, of course. But if you have studied it before, I recommend that you memorize it if you don't already have it memorized, because it is tested, but it's not on the formula sheet. There is a formula sheet on the PSAT and SAT, but it doesn't have the quadratic formula on it, which I find very bizarre because it's exactly the kind of formula that I would want to have on a formula sheet. But it's tested, but not on the formula sheet. So make sure that you memorize it because that can put you ahead of some people who haven't done so. In this formula, A is the coefficient of x squared, B is the coefficient of x, and C is the number that's not attached to any x's at all. So when you get an equation like this one, you can use the quadratic formula to solve it, even though it's not easily foilable. For today's purposes, I am going to give you the quadratic formula on the screen, but again, on test day, this would need to be in your mind. I'll give you a couple of minutes to practice this one. Good luck and enjoy the practice. All right, guys, I want to have a strategy talk with you here. In about 2 minutes, 36% of people got an answer in the poll. Now, those people did pretty well. More than two-thirds of the people who voted got it right. But just to be clear, only 36% of people voted in almost 2 minutes. On test day, you have an average between 1 and 1.5 minutes per question. You should not be worried about that, by the way. You don't need to be sitting there going, oh, I can only spend a minute to a minute and a half. That's just going to stress you out and make you do worse. You should do it like this. You see a question, if you know how to do it, do it. If it's like, this question sucks, flag it, skip it, so that you're getting through the easy ones really quickly, and then you can look back and say, okay, I just finished number 22. I got, 10 minutes left. I skipped 7 questions. Now, which of these seems like the most promising use of my time? Your goal on the PSAT is very single-minded. Always be spending your time getting points. If you're spending your time trying to figure out a hard question, you're not getting points. You're just trying to do math, and that's great. Do math in your spare time. On the PSAT, get points. So this one was a very, very hard one. With almost 2 minutes of time spent, less than 40% of us got an answer at all. Now, let me ask you this. Did anybody cheat? Did anybody use Desmos even though I put the quadratic formula on the screen here? Anybody just do it in Desmos? Watch what happens when you do the Desmos technique I showed you earlier. Do not type equals 0. Just type in the part before the equal sign. And remind me, what am I looking for after typing in this stuff other than the equals 0 part? I'm looking for the x-intercepts. Okay, negative 1.125 and negative 2. Is one of these in the answer choices? Yep, pick it, move on, you're done. That's all you have to do. You could literally not know anything about math and get this question right by cheating in Desmos. Now, are there going to be a lot of questions like this? No. But this is what a lot of people have a hard time understanding. And it's like one thing I really hope I can impart on you after today, because obviously you're not done with your PSAT prep after today. Many of you are not in 11th grade. You're going to be taking the PSAT again. You're going to maybe do more prep in the future. But I hope that this one thought can stay with you, even if you forget everything else. The PSAT, contrary to what a lot of people on TikTok will tell you, is not crackable just by putting everything in Desmos. The vast majority of questions do not benefit much or at all from Desmos. So it's not that which I am preaching here. It doesn't come up often that you use Desmos to solve a problem, but it doesn't have to. If there's one question like this that many of your competitors who are just as good as you are at math spend 3 minutes and cannot solve, and you solve that one question in 20 seconds by putting it into Desmos and going, oh, I'm hovering over the dot and it says -2 and that's a choice, and then you put choice A, and you save 2.5 minutes compared to your competitors, you now have an advantage. You've got 2.5 extra minutes to try to crack another difficult question later down the line that they don't have. Desmos doesn't have to be used a lot. It's just gonna make a big difference if you catch the correct times to use it. So that's the takeaway from this one. And by the way, if this were not an answer, I just want to briefly show you something. You might wonder, what about this -1.125? I'm going to actually show you this. If you click on a dot and click on this button, it saves the point, so you don't have to memorize it. -1.125. There's this button right here. When you type a thing into Desmos, there's this button. It looks like two squares with a line in between, like a fraction. If you click on this, it's very similar, for those of you graphing calculator nerds, to the math frac option on a graphing calculator, which gives you a most simplified fraction of whatever is typed in here. Bloop. You can see that this is -9/8. Okay, so this point right here, that is -9/8, whereas choice B is -8/9. And so that's how you can tell that that is wrong. It's actually the reciprocal of the other valid answer along with -2. But if the test makers had chosen this to be the answer, if they had chosen this dot to be the correct answer, then that is how you could confirm it. Let me show you this one more time. You click on this dot so it stays up when you move away your mouse. You click on this button here, which says export point to expression to save it. Then in a new line, you copy the number, and then you click this button to get it as a most simplified fraction. So if there had been a choice that said -9/8, that is how you could confirm that this point right here is in fact the answer to the question. In this case, the test makers were nice, and they just made the other one be the answer. Then you can just click choice A and move on. All right, folks. Hope you enjoyed this look at the quadratic formula. We're going to take a look now at what is the toughest topic that we're covering in today's session, which is graphing quadratics, but I'm going to give you a break first. That was a very intensive hour. If you'd be so kind, Benji, please give us, or Rich, I'm not sure which one of you is doing this, please give us a 5-minute timer. Folks, take 5 minutes, stand up, stretch, relax, enjoy life. When we come back, we're going to work on graphing quadratics, which will be a pretty intensive topic. I'll slow down for this one and really explain it, and then we'll do a couple of questions and finish math, then work on reading and writing. Enjoy your time off, everybody. Somebody's just asked if we're going to cover rates and percents. Alas, we do not have time for those in this cram session. Someone else wanted to know if we're going to cover any word problems today. I don't believe that we're going to have time for that, though we may be able to do one at the end, depending on how things go for reading and writing. So I can't promise that, private chatter, but it is not impossible. A lot of people are asking about recordings. You will be emailed a link to a recording within 1 to 2 business days. A lot of people are also asking, like, does the PSAT count for national merit any year besides 11th grade? No. Only 11th grade counts for national merit, so it really is just, pure practice with nothing negative attached if you don't do well any year before 11th grade. Private chatter, like I just said, you will be emailed the link. You will be emailed the link within 1 or 2 business days for this session recording. All right, gang, welcome back. Let's take a look at our final math topic today. We're going to discuss graphing quadratics, and I'm going to emphasize some things that a lot of people don't realize are important on the PSAT and the SAT. So let's take a look. First of all, when you graph a quadratic in the coordinate plane, what shape do you get? You get a parabola. All right, let's just go ahead and put one in here. Start it down there and have it go like this. Okay. One of the more tricky areas on the PSAT and the SAT is managing the different ways that you can write an equation for a quadratic and thus a parabola. Each of the different equations tells you something different about it. The worst is standard form. This is the form that we do algebra with. Ax squared plus bx plus c. It's the form you can plug into the quadratic formula. But honestly, this doesn't really tell you a whole lot about the parabola. Let me know in the chat what's one of like maybe the, I don't know, 2 facts about the parabola that you get from standard form. You get the y-intercept exactly, Arush, and that is c. So you get that. And then indeed, Kennedy, you get whether the parabola opens up or down. Exactly, Hazel. So basically, if A is a positive number, then it opens up. But if A is a negative number, then it opens down. And other than that, you don't really get a whole lot from standard form. A much better form is vertex form. So vertex form looks like this. And the reason that this is a nice form is that it tells you what the vertex is. So, for example, with my parabola, let's just make up a vertex here. Let's say that this is 8, -5. All right. If that's the case, then what would the vertex form be? Let's assume that A is 1. What would vertex form be for this parabola? It would be x minus 8 squared minus 5. Now, this is a general feature of formulas. If you have a minus sign in front of a variable, then whatever the actual value is comes out looking flipped. Like my x coordinate of the vertex is 8, but I write it as x minus 8. But if you have a plus sign, then that means you don't flip it. So my y coordinate of the vertex is -5, and I do end up writing a -5 where the y coordinate goes. So take a moment, pause there, digest, make sure that makes sense. With a vertex of 8, -5, I'd have a vertex form that looks like this. And okay, if the A was not 1, we'd stick like an A out front here. Just so you know, the A in standard form is the same as the A in vertex form, so that is directly transferable from one to the other. This is why vertex form is really good. You can read the vertex of the parabola right off of it. It's HK. Just got to make sure you deal with that minus sign in front of the H. Now, there is a weird trick for finding H if you're given standard form. Let me know in the chat. Anyone remember this from school? This little obscure trick. Oh, yeah, that's right, SD. Very good. I'm going to add this to our standard form notes. H equals -b over 2a. And I swear, College Board like either doesn't know this or it's just sticking its head in the sand going la la la, pretending it doesn't exist. I've seen on official College Board questions where they'll spend like 3 paragraphs completing the square to turn standard form into vertex form, and then they'll be like, aha! I now know the vertex. And it's like, okay, but you could have just done -b over 2a and gotten it instantly instead of all that. So make sure you know this. That is not even a Desmos hack. That's just like a math trick that College Board seems to not know about and doesn't seem to realize that is like a massive shortcut on some of its advanced algebra problems. So please, 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 it's definitely not on the formula sheet. Study this and make sure that you know it going into the test. The last thing I'm going to show you that College Board is aware of and does test is parabola symmetry. This is something I don't even really remember studying that much in school, but it is used on some of the trickier College Board problems. Let me know in the chat, folks, what's this vertical line I just drew here that cuts the parabola in half and passes through the vertex? What would be the equation of this? Yes, you are correct. This is the axis of symmetry, or AOS. What would be the equation for this specific one? It's x equals 8. In general, to get a vertical line in the coordinate plane, it needs to be x equals a number, and that number needs to be h, the x coordinate of the vertex. I'm going to add this to the notes. Axis of symmetry, x equals h. Now, a lot of people know this, but what a lot of people don't realize is that you can use parabola symmetry to deduce things. So let's say that in this parabola, I have a point, and that point is 10, 3. Humor me if you would. What other point needs to also be on this parabola? What point do you know for sure is on this parabola? It's not -10, 3. Not -10, 3. That's what you might have thought I was setting up for, but that's actually a trap. It's not -10, 3. It's 6, 3. Yeah. Now, if you're wondering, hold on. Mean old man Boris just tricked me. What's going on here? Well, it's because 10, the x coordinate of that point, is 2 units away from the axis of symmetry, which means that there has to be another point that is also 2 units away from the axis of symmetry that has the same y coordinate. So we have 10 is 2 more than 8. That means that the point 2 less than 8 must also have the same y coordinate. So 6, 3 has to also be on this parabola. And again, if you're not understanding this and you've never learned this in school, obviously this is going to be very confusing. You need to come back later and do some more work and catch up. But again, for the advanced students here who are really cramming this stuff in, if this can make sense, then this is worth knowing on the test because it actually allows you to do things backwards. I can come to you and I can say, hey, there's a parabola and f of 3 on this parabola equals f of 9. Folks, based on this information, what's the x-coordinate of this parabola? Yeah, Angie, Cyber 5, it's got to be 6. You just take the average of 3 and 9, and that gives you the x-coordinate. Now, this is, again, very advanced, and it will not make sense to a lot of people who are taking the PSAT, but if this makes sense in your brain, make sure that you make a note of it and study it and don't forget about it. Because if you ever know that 2 points on a parabola, two x inputs, have the same y outcome, even if you don't know what the y value is, then you know for a fact that those 2 points need to be on the same distance from the axis of symmetry. So the axis of symmetry here has to be 6 because 6 is equidistant from 3 and from 9. It's exactly halfway in between 3 and 9. So that's where the x-coordinate of the function must be. So again, if this doesn't make sense, don't worry about it. Just, take the SAT and PSAT. It's not going to matter often, but if you are shooting for that 700 plus score, this may be something that comes up like once on the test. And if you can directly translate, oh, f of 3 equals f of 9, that means the test maker has just told me h is 6. Like if you understand that and can do that in 10 seconds, then you're going to get a really big advantage over other people who are stumbling over that problem. All right, folks, I'm going to take a moment. You can, of course, save this. If you'd like to screenshot these homespun notes, feel free to do so now. They will be up for a moment longer. You can take a screenshot if you want to save them. When they disappear, we're going to be doing a couple, or I should say one, challenging practice question. All right, if you'd be so kind, give this one a shot, folks. I'll see you in a minute or so to review it. Good luck. All right, folks, I hope you know that we did some really, really hard questions today. We didn't just pretend that hard questions don't exist and feed you a bunch of easy questions in this cram session. With about a minute and 40 seconds past, half of you got an answer. Of the people who got an answer, if C is the right answer, then still 60% of us got it wrong. So take a moment to appreciate just how hard this question was, spending more time than you have on average per question. Almost half of us could not get an answer at all, and a majority of the people who got an answer still were wrong. This is a crazy hard question, and I am going to show you 2 ways that you can beat it. There is going to be the cognitive way, which is very quick, but requires the hardest level of comprehension. And then there's going to be the cheating and Desmos way, which requires less cognition, but takes a little bit more time. Here is the cognitive way of doing it. You have a parabola. You know this is a parabola because it's x squared. Let me know in the chat, folks, is this parabola opening up or is this parabola opening down? This parabola is opening down because the test makers told you that a is less than 0. Now, one thing I've noticed working with a lot of tutoring students over the course of this digital SAT's lifespan is one of the most frequent things I hear from a student when they get a question wrong is like, oh, I missed that, or oh, I didn't read that. Do not try to save time by not reading math questions. The best way to save time, get better at math. People who are good at math spend less time solving math problems than people who are bad at math. I know it may sound a little bit corny, but the best thing you can do to get faster at math is to just get better at math. That's how you save time. Do not try to save time by not reading. That's going to cost you time. It only takes one wacky question where you miss a key fact, and then suddenly you're spending like 4 minutes trying to figure out what the heck's going on because you're confused. Do not skip the information. The test makers tell you a is less than 0, so this parabola opens downward. Now, we're asked for the maximum value of the function. Okay, if I have a negative number times x squared, is that ever going to be positive? Is a negative number times x squared ever going to be positive? No, because any number squared is either 0 or positive, and that times a negative is never going to be positive. But it could be 0. When is ax squared going to be 0? When x is 0. So, we know that the vertex of this parabola, the maximum point, has an x-coordinate of 0. If it's anything other than 0, you're going to have a positive number, and a positive number times a negative is negative. But if it's 0, 0 squared is 0, and 0 times a negative number is still 0. And we can never be positive, so 0 is the best that we can get. Now, what is f of 0? F of 0 is not 0. F of 0 is not 0. F of 0 is negative c. So negative c is the answer. Now I'm going to pause here. This either made sense or it didn't. Okay, if it didn't make sense, hang on. We're going to do Desmos in a second to try to cheat the system here. But if this makes sense, this is the fastest way to do it. Ax squared is maximized when x is 0, which means that f of 0 is going to give us the maximum value, and f of 0 is negative c, which is choice C. Click on it, skedoodle. Okay, suppose that does not make sense. All right, what you could do instead is put this into Desmos. In fact, when you put this into Desmos, you don't even have to change how you type it. You can actually just type ax squared minus c, and then make up numbers for a and for c later. Let me know oh, but if someone wants to say like, where'd you get 0 from? Your brain, right? That has to come from your brain. If it's not coming from your brain, use this method instead. Shove it into Desmos, make up a number for a. What do you want a to be, folks? Do a little parlor trick. I'm going to let you pick the number. Okay, so we have a lot of people wanting -5. Okay, that's a bit of spamming from Sadiqa. Please do not spam. Spam is bad. Do not spam, please. Okay, I'll say -5 was a popular choice. Remember, you have to follow the rules. We're told that A is negative, so we can't pick a positive number. All right, how about C? What do you want C to be? Okay, I can't do 6 or 7. Okay, well, I see a lot of 2s. Great, let's do 2. Okay. Once you provide to Desmos what A and C are, and remember, use equal sign. You're not using a tilde here. You're not asking Desmos to solve for A or C. You're just, you know what you want A and C to be. When you know what you want the variable to be, use an equal sign. Desmos will graph it. So even though I typed ax squared minus c into Desmos, and then I defined A and C later, Desmos remembers the values of A and C in the other lines, and then it plugs them in here and graphs the function. So you tell me, folks, what's the maximum value of this function? It's -2. Okay, so the answer is -2. Does -a times c equal -2? No. -ac equals 10. Wrong. Does ac equal -2? No. AC equals +10. Wrong. Does -c equal -2? Mm-hmm. -c equals -2. Aha! It matches. It matches. Great. That's the right answer. C, of course, equals 2, not -2. So that's not quite right. But then you can get choice C and skedoodle. This is a concept we haven't talked about yet today, but it is a useful concept on some PSAT and SAT math questions. If there are variables in the question then it may be possible to make up numbers for them and solve the question that way. We call this picking numbers in the Kaplan class. You then solve the problem with the numbers that you picked, and you can then plug them into the choices to see which one gives you a matching answer. All right, folks, that's it for math. We're going to spend the remaining 40-ish minutes on reading and writing. And we're going to barely scratch the surface of reading and writing today, just like we honestly barely scratched the surface of math, but it is a cram session. So I hope it at least gives you something to work on. We're going to look at the method for reading and writing, and we're going to check out a few examples of 3 question types: words and context, command of evidence, and rhetorical synthesis. I'm also going to sneak a conventions question in there. So the way you should approach PSAT questions is like this. First, identify what the question is asking, then read the passage, and finally, decide whether you should be predicting on the problem or not. We're going to see examples where you should predict and examples where you shouldn't. So we'll see a mix of that today. Now, there's also this question type called standard English conventions. And this one is sort of special, so I'm going to highlight it immediately. Somewhere around question 15 of each reading and writing module, you will get a block of questions that all use this language. Which choice completes the text so it conforms to the conventions of standard English? We won't really have time to get into this today, but if you take the class later or if you go work in Khan Academy, you will learn that there are 4 types of questions that all use this opener. So for this question type specifically, we recommend that you look at the answer choices first to figure out which type of question it is. There's 4 of them. There's punctuation, verbs, pronouns, and modifiers. Now, for my verbal vixens in the classroom, let me know, based on these answer choices, which of these 4 types of conventions questions do you think it is? And again, please don't put the answers in the chat. If you have an answer, please put it in the poll. Yes, this is a verbs question. So I'll just sneak this in here. Our strategy for verbs questions is, first of all, identify the subject of the verb, and then consider the tense. So in this case, we read and it says, after a successful test message, the soldiers blank creating their own translations of military terms that did not have a counterpart in the Choctaw language. The Germans never cracked their messages. All right, what is the subject of the verb in the blank? It is the soldiers, plural. Which answer choices can we eliminate because they do not work for a plural subject? Yeah, choice A, you can't say the soldiers starts, that would be singular, but B, C, D all work for a plural subject. Depending on the sentence, you may say the soldiers started doing something, you may say the soldiers start doing something, and then you could also say the soldiers were starting to do something. So any of those could theoretically work. So on this one, we have to consider the tense as well as the singularity or plurality of the subject. Now, what other verb is present in this passage that gives you a pretty big clue about the tense of the verb that we should use? I mean, this is World War One. That's a really big clue. We have did, we have cracked, we have used. This is all past tense. So we need the past tense verb, which is choice B for Boris. I'm gonna grab it and move on with the PSAT. So that'd be an example of a relatively low difficulty conventions questions for the PSAT, but that's how you do it. On conventions questions, instead of doing the other method, you look at the answer choices, figure out which type of conventions question it is, and then you use the strategy for that type. All right, our remaining questions today, we're going to do a little survey of 3 different question types. The first is words and context. So again, let's review the steps. Step 1, identify the type of question. Words and context questions will ask you the question in one of 2 ways. This one is the more common one. Which choice completes the text with the most logical and precise word or phrase? These exact words in this exact order. Then you read the passage, looking for clues about what should go in the blank. And finally, on these, you should predict. On words and context questions, you must predict. A lot of students think that these are vocabulary questions, but when I review them with my students, it turns out the issue is almost never vocabulary. It is sometimes, but more than half of the time, the issue is actually that they misunderstood the passage and didn't come up with the correct prediction. So make sure that you don't just write these off as, oh, my vocabulary is bad, so I can't do these. Not necessarily. Practice predicting on these questions, and then see what happens when you get to the choices. Welsh rarebit is a traditional British dish. It's blank toasted bread covered in a cheesy bechamel sauce, one which contains a bunch of stuff. The cheese-covered bread is then toasted again. Okay, what would you put in this blank? Don't give me a letter. I don't want letters. I don't want letters of the choices. I want to know what word or phrase you would put into this blank in order to make the sentence make sense. Okay, so I'm seeing an honest prediction here. Sadiqa, very nice. Christopher, yep, exactly, Liam. I think most people here would say made of. That's what we're looking for. It is made of toasted bread, covered in a cheesy sauce, etc. So we take a look at our answer choices, and consists of is a pretty good match. Grapples with does not mean made of, comes to does not mean made of, and develops into is not made of. The only choice that's telling you made of is A. We're going to click on it, and we're going to move on with the PSAT. On words and context questions, always practice predicting. And I'll just note these are the first few questions of every module. Do not get hung up on these. If you cannot make a prediction, flag it, skip it. My motto on these, if you can't predict, it must be skipped. Because it's early in the test, you really don't want to blow your time budget on one of these just because you can't make a prediction. Okay, I'm going to give you another one. This one is like the other flavor of words and context. It is where they give you a word and they ask you what it means in context. The spoiler I'd like to share with you today is that this is the same as the other question type. Do not consider that word. In fact, there's a really good chance if that word is planted in your brain that it's going to lead you towards trap answers. Do not think about that word. Trap answers may be common meanings of the word that have nothing to do with the context in which the word is used in that particular passage. Just treat it like a blank, make a prediction, and then look for matches in the choices. Give it a shot, folks, and I'll see you in about a minute to review it. All right, gang, welcome back. Let's go ahead and review. So it says the Holy Roman Empire consisted of a blank 1,800 subunits. Let me know in the chat, folks, what was your prediction for this one? Yeah, I really liked shocking. That's a good one. It's like, wow, I can't believe it at that many subunits. That is a truly shocking number of subunits. Yeah, Maya, wow! Things I'm wowed by. The number of the Roman Empire subunits. All right, we take a look at our answer choices. Astonishing means shocking. That's a great match for the prediction. Miraculous, that means that it like defies the laws of physics and is supernatural. Well, no, it actually happens, so that doesn't make sense. Homogeneous means that they're all the same, but that's not true. They're actually quite different from each other. And then choice D, very tempting trap answer here. A lot of people picked choice D. 10% of the class did because it says nightmare in the previous sentence. But the thing is that there's nothing nightmarish about the number 1,800. Right? It's not like this is a case where you can take that word and use it as your prediction. The point is, it is kind of crazy that it had this many subunits. That's what makes it a nightmare, not the fact that the number is inherently a nightmare. So that's how we got to get rid of D. If you predict on this one and you predict correctly, you can find choice A and get the answer very quickly. Otherwise, you might pick choice D. But then again, that's not a vocabulary issue. That is an issue with making the right prediction. All right, folks, that's a quick look at words in context. Let's take a look at our next question type in our survey, which is the command of evidence. And there's actually two different types of questions within the command of evidence question type. The first type is what we call quantitative command of evidence. In a quantitative command of evidence question, you get data and you should try to make a prediction. I'll make a separate note of this on the screen. For quantitative, you predict, but for the textual, you don't predict. I'm also, before giving you this question to do on your own, going to give you a quick overview of the general approach that you should take when tackling a question like this. Whenever you see data, the first thing that you should do is read the question. After reading the question, you should take a look at the passage, and only after you've read the passage should you look at the data. You don't want to look at the data to try to make a prediction until you understand what's happening in the passage. Only once you're done with the passage do you look at the data, make a prediction, and lastly, you look at the choices. All right, folks, give it a shot. In about a minute, we'll review it. All right, gang, let's go ahead and review. I'll be honest, this is a pretty low difficulty one. You're not likely to see a lot of questions on tests at this difficulty level. So again, definitely take a look in Khan Academy for some additional practice on command of evidence if you want to review more challenging versions of this question type. So here we read the question, we're looking to complete the text, and the text says that this is a gamer who's looking for a processor, and we have some characteristics. We need highest possible speed, but within a $250 budget. So when we go to like the third thing, which is look at the data, we're going to check these 5 processors to see which one fits the criteria. Let me know in the chat, folks, which of these processors fits the criteria of having the highest possible speed within a $250 budget. It is the X180, which is weirdly the fastest one in the table, so the budget doesn't even really matter that much. But anyway, that's the only one that is under 250, but has a higher cost than any others that are under 250, or higher processing speed than any others that are under 250. So then you just pick choice A and you're done. This question is very easy, but it also illustrates why predicting is important in quantitative command of evidence questions. What is the point of looking at the answer choices if you don't already understand that X180 is the answer, right? Like, oh, X180 or X225 or X230. Oh, but what about X175? Like, there's just a waste of time. If you can't predict, it must be skipped. You need to understand the passage and what the gamer is looking for, then understand in the data which feature satisfies the information of the passage, and then that's just the answer. But if you don't already understand it, the answer is not going to help you get there. If you were tempted by choice C, which got over a fifth of the vote, so by no means was that a ridiculous trap answer, 230 is also in the budget of $250 or less, but its speed is lower than the speed of the X180. Can we remove Ryan from the room, please? Let's remove Ryan from the room, Rich, if that's possible. We have already given a warning about spamming and 6-7 stuff. So, Ryan, thank you for coming. Now you can go. Now let's take a look, and Aisha as well. Please stop that. We do not want that here. We're now going to take a look at the other type of command of evidence question, which has a different strategy. On textual command of evidence questions, there's a couple of things to watch out for. One is that it's not obvious that this is a textual command of evidence question. With the quantitative ones, there's data making it obvious that that is a quantitative command of evidence. But on the textual ones, you actually have to understand that it is that based on the text. So in these questions, the way that you tell is that you're asked to support, weaken, or illustrate someone's claim. Note that claim is not the only word the test makers can use. They can also say like hypothesis, theory, idea, belief, argument. There's all kinds of different words that you could use here, but the point is that someone has an idea or an opinion, and you are asked to support it, illustrate it, or weaken it. If that happens, you do not predict. In that case, you're going to use the elimination part of step 3. That being said, when you read the passage, you should at least understand what the claim is. If you read the passage and cannot understand the claim that you need to illustrate, support, or weaken, flag and skip the question. How will you know looking at the choices? Does this choice support the claim or not if you don't even understand what the claim is saying? So try that on this one. I'll give you a couple of minutes to work on it. And when 2 minutes are up, we're going to review it. Good luck. All right, gang, welcome back. Let's go ahead and review this question. So first of all, where do we see the claim that we need to support on this one? So you have to be careful. It's not at the beginning. There is a hypothesis at the beginning by David Strachan, but the test maker is not asking you to support David Strachan's hypothesis. It's asking to support Hisawa and team's claim. So you have to wait until the end. The test makers were nice on this one. They use the word claims to make it very clear where the claim is, but of course you don't necessarily have to count on that. There may be more tougher passages where that's not so clear, but in this case, we do have a claim right there. The ownership of several types of pets conveys benefits consistent with the hygiene hypothesis. Now, this is actually a much harder question than the one that we just did, because you need to go back and understand what the hygiene hypothesis is in order to understand what this is saying. So now we go back. Okay, yes, this isn't the one that we're trying to support, but what is the hygiene hypothesis? Yes, indeed, Lamisha. It is in the second sentence. And Sadiqa, that is a really good paraphrase. Cyber high five. More pets means less allergies. So if you're a baby and you're growing up in a house that has more pets in it, like more different types of animals, then you're going to have fewer allergies. And basically, we are seeing that this hypothesis is true or not true, supported or unsupported by the research that Okabe Hisawa and his team did. It's supported. It is true, yes, consistent with. Conveys benefits consistent with the hypothesis means that, according to their research, it actually seems to be true. Okay, now I'm not going to make any kind of predictions, but I understand the claim now. The claim I need to support is that if you grow up with a wide variety of pets, the more pets you grow up with, the more different types of pets. You got your ferrets, your cat, your dog, your goldfish, then you're less likely to have allergies. Now, every single answer choice got at least one vote. So let's take a look at all four. A says, of the houses with a hamster, the children born into those households had a higher rate of allergies than the kids born into households without pets. Does that choice support our hypothesis? This is indeed. Yes, Lamisha. Very good, Coco. This is contradictory. It's backwards. There's two ways for a textual command of evidence question choice to be wrong. One is that it can be backwards. I'm going to abbreviate this as 180. It's like 180 degrees from the truth. The other is that it can be off topic. It doesn't strengthen it or weaken it. It doesn't do the opposite of what we need. It just doesn't have anything to do with it at all. In this case, that is backwards. We're going to get rid of choice A. I'll point out A was our most tempting trap answer, with about a seventh of us picking it. So don't feel bad if you picked it. Sometimes people get discouraged, like, oh, that was backwards of what I wanted. No, I'm so dumb. No, 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 you're not. These can be the most tempting answers because they're on topic. And one little switch is flipped, and that makes the choice wrong. If you misread higher as lower, then this choice would be correct. So don't be mad at yourself when you pick a 180. They are very tempting, even though they're backwards in the end. Okay, B. 22% of the children studied were born into households that owned one or more types of pet. What's missing from this answer? This was not a popular choice. What is missing? There's no allergies in this one. So like, well, did the kids get allergies or not? Like it doesn't say. So this is just irrelevant. It neither strengthens nor weakens the claim. C. In the years since 1989, food allergies in young children have been continuing to increase in frequency and severity. What's missing from choice C? That's going to make you go, wait a minute. There's no pets. So B has no allergies and C has no pets. So B and C are kind of like the Dumb and Dumber duo here, where each one of them is missing something that would be pretty critical to supporting the claim. Together, though, these two choices got as many votes as A. So about 1/7 of the class went for A, which was backwards. Another seventh of the class went for one of the choices that was off topic. So these are very serious traps. Ultimately, over 30% or almost 30% of the class picked one of those answers. Our answer is going to be here, choice D. This is the one that has pets with the dog. It has allergies, so it's on topic, and the ones that had the dog had a lower rate of allergies. If this word lower were higher, D would be wrong. If the question were weaken instead of support, D would be wrong. So you have to read these very carefully. I'm going to give my spiel here. You know, if there's one thing that you remember from reading and writing practice with me today, even if you forget everything else, I hope it is this. When you look at social media for the SAT and PSAT, you're going to see a lot of people trying to tempt you with all kinds of shortcuts and tricks. Like, oh, you don't need to read the whole passage. Just look for these words. I am Mr. Stuffy and boring. All right. When I think about the PSAT and the SAT reading and writing test, is the College Board did a good job. It's like that old gif of the guy clapping angrily. Like that's me. College Board really wanted to make you read the whole passage, and they succeeded. If you try shortcuts, if you try to skim, you're just going to get things wrong, or you're going to get confused and waste a bunch of time to make up for the fact that you're confused, and you wouldn't have been confused if you had just read the passage to begin with. Do not speed read, do not rush, read the whole thing. They are testing you on your ability to understand what you read, and they do a really good job of it. There's not a lot of tricks or shortcuts that you can use to bypass having to read the passage and actually just get it. Now, I am going to put some recommendations for daily reading. If you're someone who's like, reading's not really my jam, once per day, I'd recommend going on the website of one of these publications, Wall Street Journal, New Yorker, Harper's. On the social sciences side of things, The Economist is pretty good. And then for a little bit of science, maybe Scientific American. These are all popular publications written in a bit of a scholarly way. Of these, Harper's is the most scholarly, so this one has the most complicated language. And they all have a website. They all have some free journal articles you can read before you hit a paywall. Just read a little bit every day. Get back issues from your library. Read one article a day and just practice trying to understand it. If you can read moderately complex scholarly text on the PSAT and the SAT, you are going to destroy people who go into the test thinking that they can beat it with weird tricks they got off TikTok. It's just not going to fly. You actually do need to be able to understand what you're reading to do well on this test. Now, is this where College Board gets the reading from? Not exactly, I wish that were the case. These are just 5 easy to access, somewhat scholarly-ish publications with the kind of writing that you need to be able to understand if you are to succeed in understanding SAT and PSAT passages. Now, that being said, there is one question type that you can do a little bit of shortcutting on, and that's the type that we're going to take a look at last today. The rhetorical synthesis questions on the PSAT and SAT are the ones that have a student who collected some notes, and then you're asked a question about the notes. This is the one and only question type that you can actually bypass having to read almost anything a healthy chunk of the time. So I'm going to show you how that works now. When you get one of these questions with the bullets, do not read the passage. Instead, focus in on the task. The student wants to explain an advantage of a dental cantilever bridge. Okay, so I'm going to look at each choice now. Remember, I'm not looking at the passage. I'm going to look at each choice and I'm going to ask myself, does this choice explain an advantage of a dental cantilever bridge? I look at A. To replace missing teeth, a traditional fixed bridge is not always a feasible solution because it requires healthy teeth on both sides of the gap. Does this explain an advantage of a dental cantilever bridge? No, it doesn't even mention it. It talks about the wrong type of bridge. Traditional fixed instead of dental cantilever. So A is wrong. B, a traditional fixed bridge is the strongest and most stable way of replacing missing teeth. Does this choice explain an advantage of a dental cantilever bridge? No, it's the wrong kind of bridge. It's traditional fixed, not dental cantilever. Oh, PSAT, you clever jokers. We're going to go ahead and get rid of it. C, as methods for replacing teeth, both traditional fixed bridges and cantilever bridges are useful depending on the number of healthy teeth able to support the bridge on each side. Okay, finally, this one actually mentions the cantilever bridge. Does it explain an advantage of it? No, there's no advantage given. So it's D. You don't ever have to read a single word of the passage. You can just grab choice D for domination and move on with the PSAT. Now, for the record, this one says a cantilever bridge can be used when there are healthy teeth on only one side. There's the advantage. You only need healthy teeth on one side to be able to use this type of bridge. That is explaining an advantage of a dental cantilever bridge. Now, there are a few people who have committed a time zone malfunction. It is not a cardinal sin. I myself have done it. This session began at 2 p.m. Eastern time. If you arrived at 2 p.m. and you're like, what's going on? It's most likely because you're in the central time zone like me and you came an hour late. You will be emailed a link to a recording of the session, so no worries, you can catch up on it, but just know that that is what is happening if you think that the session is in a weird spot. All right, I'm going to let you try this strategy entirely on your own. If you'd be so kind, folks, please give this question a shot. We are, by the way, using elimination on this one because we really can't make a prediction if we're not reading the passage. We're eliminating choices based on which ones do or don't do the task. Give it a shot and vote in the poll when you're done. All right, gang, welcome back. Let's review this question. We want to introduce the minds of Billy Milligan to an audience already familiar with author Daniel Keyes. Hey, let me know in the chat, folks. Should I have information about Daniel Keyes? Should I have information about Daniel Keyes in the question? The audience is already familiar with Daniel Keyes. What do we? No, I don't need it. If it said audience unfamiliar, then you would definitely need to have information about Daniel Keyes in the answer. But if the audience is already familiar, you don't need information about Daniel Keyes. You do need information about the minds of Billy Milligan. So watch for this word. Two letters, a U and an N, can make a huge difference on these questions because they tell you whether you should or should not have information about something. Okay, let's look at A. Every choice got at least 8% of the vote. So every single answer was at least a somewhat significant trap on this one. The award-winning Flowers for Algernon, which is a fictional account of a man who undergoes a significant psychological change, was written by Daniel Keyes, who also wrote The Minds of Billy Milligan. Okay, does this introduce The Minds of Billy Milligan? No, it introduces Flowers for Algernon. Oops, wrong book. Oh no. 14% of us picked this answer. So if you picked it, don't feel bad. It was tied for our number one trap. A seventh of the class went for it. So if you missed the fact that it was introducing the wrong book, do not feel bad. College Board, hate to say it, bunch of smart people. Really smart people working for that company. And those smart people do everything in their power to try to trick you on these types of questions. That's why you should not rush while reading and do not skim text. Do not trust anyone on social media who is a professional SAT, a PSAT instructor, or otherwise telling you anything whatsoever about skimming or skipping. It does not work. You need to catch these details. Otherwise, you're going to plow straight into a wrong answer. And that's important because if you save time by skimming, what does that get you? Like, what does saving time get you? It gets you the ability to answer an additional question because you save time. So you got to do an extra question. But if you got the question wrong because of rushing, that negates the value of the extra question you're able to answer. So why work so hard? Why pressure yourself to rush and skim and skip? Just relax. Just read it at a normal, comfortable speed and do not miss these details. Okay, B. Like Flowers for Algernon, Keyes' The Minds of Billy Milligan is a foray into a psychological disorder, but this time through a non-fiction lens. Does this introduce us to the minds of Billy Milligan? Yes. Now, I want to be clear about something. You cannot pick it yet. You cannot pick this answer because we didn't read the passage. Hard rhetorical synthesis questions will often force you to read the bullets. Any of you doing your work on one prep know what I'm talking about. In August, there was a new batch of questions released, which are pretty fresh still at this point, not even 2 months old yet. And the hard August 2025 rhetorical synthesis questions that you can find in the official databanks often make you read the bullets. So you do need to read C and D to make sure that those are wrong before you pick B. Okay, so C. Daniel Keyes, author of The Minds of Billy Milligan, received a bachelor's degree in psychology before joining the staff of Marvel Science Stories. Okay, does that choice introduce The Minds of Billy Milligan? No, it introduces the author of The Minds of Billy Milligan, who the audience is already familiar with, so they're not going to need these biographical facts about him. Get rid of C. D. The Minds of Billy Milligan and Flowers for Algernon both examine psychological disorders, and both are written by American author Daniel Keyes. Does this choice introduce us to the minds of Billy Milligan? Not really. I like what Eustra said, which is like kinda. Well, we know that it examines a psychological disorder. But the thing is, it's bunched in with Flowers for Algernon, so it's not actually giving us any new information about the minds of Billy Milligan compared to Flowers for Algernon. So this was our other most popular answer with a seventh of us voting it. Note the difference between B and D. B, like D, tells you that Flowers for Algernon is similar to Minds of Billy Milligan. B, like D, indicates that it examines psychological disorders. But unlike D, B tells you that the Minds of Billy Milligan is nonfiction. D doesn't tell you that, so it's not actually giving you the same information that B is. So that's why B for Boris, or in this case, B for Benji, is the right answer. We're going to go ahead and click that choice, confirm it, and move on with the test. All right, folks. Hope you enjoyed this very short foray into PSAT prep. I do want to be frank with you. A lot of people are asking us things like, can you do some more math? This was, it's a free session. The session was 2 free hours of PSAT prep, and we hope that you enjoyed it. If you'd like more comprehensive PSAT or SAT prep, we do have PSAT classes, SAT classes, and private tutoring for PSAT and SAT if you really want to invest in it. So we have all these options available if you'd like to spend some more time with us learning more content for the test. But if you have any questions, we'll stick around for a couple of minutes to go to the hour because the session does last until the hour. So I did want to give a couple of minutes for questions if people have them. But if you want to go, you're allowed to go. Have a lovely day. Good luck in your prep. And we will look forward to seeing you again soon if you decide to join us for some more preparation. Everybody's saying thank you in the chat. Let me just say thank you so much for coming. It's been an absolute pleasure working with you today. Thank you very much for bringing a lot of energy. Someone's asking, can we do a math word problem? Alas, we do not quite have time to do a math word problem today. Private Chatter wants to know, what were all the main math points? I would highly recommend that you stay tuned to your email when the link to the recording comes and watch the first hour of that recording. That will give you a very good summary of the main math points that we spent over an hour covering today. Someone wants to know, is the New York Times a good resource? Not really. That's not quite up to the scholarly level of language that we would expect to see on the SAT. Someone wants to know, how many questions can you miss and still qualify for National Merit Scholarship? The answer is not many, but I can't give you a more precise answer because it varies by state. I can't even give you an average. I'm sorry, Private Chat. It really depends on the state. I would say, like, if you're in New York or California, it's very, very competitive. Just try to keep it as close to zero as possible, like one or two. If you are in Montana or Idaho, you maybe have a little bit more wiggle room, but you basically have to be in the 99th percentile or close to it in order to be a National Merit finalist. When will the recording come? It should come tomorrow. It may come on Tuesday, but I really hope it'll come tomorrow. It's just we can't quite control these things. When are we sending the recording? Within the next 1 to 2 business days. Private Chatter wants to know how to not be jealous of other people's score. Well, the glib answer to that is get your target score, and then it doesn't matter what other people got. The other way to think about it is if you don't get your target score, then it doesn't matter what other people got. Like if you don't get your target score, what matters is that you didn't hit your target, not that other people did. So my advice would just be not worry about other people and focus on your own prep. Now, someone also wants to know how many questions can you get wrong? That varies from test to test, but it's like in the medium to high single digits most of the time. Someone wants to know what College Board prep and practice exams are good for the PSAT 8, 9. You can just do the PSAT prep. It'll have slightly harder math than the PSAT 8, 9, but I would just do the PSAT prep from the data banks to work for any of the PSATs that are being taken. Someone wants to know how many minutes should I study each day? That's the wrong question. It's not how many minutes you study per day. It's should be spread over a week. Some days you can study more easily than others. If you like go to school and then spend 3 hours doing cross country after school, that's not as good of a day for prepping as Saturday when you've got nothing going on. So plan your study time in weekly batches, not on daily batches. Someone wants to know about California. Very competitive. Very competitive. Someone and more people are asking about the national requirements for the scholarship test. Again, pretty much 99th percentile. Someone's asking, like, are practice tests easier than the real thing? Nope, the practice tests are about as hard as the real thing. What's the best way to study? My advice would just be do what you can. People often ask, like, well, what can I do to study if like my test is in 2 days? Like nothing that I would like if there was some way that we had that you could like get ready for the test in 2 days, that's what we would teach to begin with. It's not like, oh, we're gonna teach this like whole thing that like spans 18 hours of prep to get you ready for the SAT, but oh, since you've only got 3 days, I'll tell you the secret where you can get it done in 3 days. Like, no, there's nothing like that. You just, do what you can and then prep more for your next test. How competitive is Minnesota? Ooh, I don't know about that. I would do a Google search and try to see. You can find some websites claiming to tell you how competitive the different states are. Maximum score on the PSAT is a 1520. On the SAT, it's a 1600. Someone wants to know math topics on the PSAT. It's Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and Geometry with a little bit of stats. Is the PSAT 10 super important? No, only the PSAT in 11th grade. More people asking about requirements. It is basically 99th percentile. I do not know about specific states. Sorry, don't know about Texas, don't know about Georgia, don't know about Florida, don't know about New Jersey. Those all sound probably pretty competitive. I believe those are pretty highly populated states, but I'd recommend doing a Google search on those. Sorry, don't know about Texas, don't know about New Jersey. Maximum PSAT score for 8-9, I believe it's a 1520, but I'm not 100% sure. Do stats questions show up on the PSAT? Yes. Are there any benefits of taking it as a sophomore? Yes. Learning what a proctored test feels like, so it's not as foreign when you take it in 11th grade when it counts. Is the whole test multiple choice? No, there are fill-in-the-blank math questions. Do I need AP pre-calc for the PSAT? God, I hope not. No, nope, no pre-calc, no calc on the SAT or PSAT. What are the differences between PSAT and SAT? So apart from the different scoring scales, SAT has slightly harder questions overall. It also has circles. PSAT does not. Does the PSAT have geometry? Yes, just not circles. Will there be Algebra 2 questions? Yes. How easy is it to score a 1500 plus? Really, really hard. On the SAT, a 1500 is the 98th percentile. It is very difficult to be in the top 2% of students. And I'll take a moment to soapbox for a second. If you hang out in the SAT subreddit, there are people making comments like, it's really easy to get a 1500 SAT. All you have to do is believe in yourself and study. And it's like, no. It is really hard to get a 1500 on the SAT because you have to be in the top 2% of people to do that. Mathematically, more than 2% of people cannot have a 1500 or higher. If everybody does better, they just make the curve harder. So it's only like 2% of people there at the top. It is very, very challenging. Do not pin your hopes and dreams on getting a 1500. Work for it, strive for it, do your very best to achieve it, but do not believe anyone who tells you it is easy. What kind of algebra 2 questions? It goes up to exponential functions and quadratics. Geometry questions will deal with things like triangles, rectangles, similar shapes. On the SAT, of course, there will be circles. You'll have lines and angles. How do you convert the PSAT scale to SAT? Just add 80, basically. Will there be a writing part for English? No, no essays. Can you bring snacks? Yes, but you cannot have them during the test. What's a good sophomore score to reach for? It doesn't matter. It affects nothing in your life. Just do the best that you can. It literally makes no difference to anything. What's the best thing to do in the break? Stand up, forget about the test, stretch, go to the bathroom, eat your snack, drink some water. Really take a break from the test. How many times can you retake the SAT? But tons of times. People take it a lot these days. Do all the questions score the same? Kind of. All the questions within a section matter the same. How many Algebra 2 questions will there be? That I do not know. Isn't the SAT worth $100 or something? I don't actually know what the current entry cost is for the SAT, but you should, of course, inquire with College Board if you qualify for a score waiver because they do help people. Is the SAT harder than the ACT? No. All standardized tests are equally hard because they're all scored on a curve. Your score depends on what percent of people did worse than you. There's no such thing as one standardized test being harder than another. Can Desmos help on very complicated equations? Yes. I don't have time to show that, unfortunately, here, but it is possible to test values in Desmos with multiple variables and try to hack a complex equation problem. Though I would definitely recommend flagging and skipping it first. How is your score affected when you get one or two questions wrong versus five? That depends on each particular test scoring scale, but the more questions you miss, the more points you lose. Do we get to Desmos on test day? Oh my God, yes, yes, you do. Does affecting PSAT or doing well on PSAT have a positive impact on our college applications? I cannot stress this enough. Your PSAT score in sophomore year has literally no effect on your life. It does not in any way whatsoever change anything. The only thing that matters is in 11th grade if you become a national merit finalist. That's it. Otherwise, the PSAT does not matter. If you get every single question right, private chatter, you'll get a 1600. Congratulations. It doesn't matter what everyone else did. Do colleges look at your ninth grade PSAT? Not as far as I know. Should I take SAT prep classes? I am biased. As a professional SAT teacher and tutor, yes, I think that you should. Of course, if you'd like to try doing Khan Academy and one prep on your own, and then take like a blue book practice test to see what you score, that could be a way to try to save some money. I would just say do not take all your blue book tests. You get 7 free practice SATs in blue book. We've had students who like take them all, and then they're like, oh shoot, I can't do this on my own. And then buy a prep class, and it's a little bit tricky at that point because you've used up all your free official College Board practice tests. So I just say don't use them all. Just use like one or two, trying it on your own, and if you can't get close to your target score, then I would suggest getting a prep class before taking the remaining ones. All right, folks. Thank you so much for your questions. I'm glad to see a lot of questions coming in here, but it is time to close up shop. Thank you so much for coming today, for sticking around to ask some great questions. We wish you all the best of luck on the PSAT and, of course, in your preparation for the SAT and beyond. Take care, everybody.